Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if you could just take a moment and silence your cell phones, please. We have no proclamations on our agenda today, so I'm going to begin with the consent agenda. Is there any item on the consent agenda that anyone has a question about, would like us to consider separately? Or do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda as is.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Is there anyone wishing to comment on the motion to approve the consent agenda? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. We have one presentation / report tonight. Barbara Whitehorn, our, what am I going to call you? CFO? Yes, CFO. She is here to talk to us about the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2017 audit report.
Yes. Hi, Barbara Whitehorn, Chief Financial Officer for the city. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm going to introduce Daniel Gockerty from our audit firm, Cherry Beckert, who will go over the year-end results and the audit with you. And then if you have questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Thank you. So there's Daniel.
Good evening. Do you all have on your laptops the presentation, or is it loaded on the? Sorry.
Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you. Okay. So as Barbara said, we're here today to communicate with you all the results of our audit, as it's been a process that has began back as early as May and June this year and has culminated at the end of October, issuing and providing the financial statements to the LGC. So today we're going to go over a couple of topics. The agenda here, we have the client service team, what the role of the external auditor is, key highlights from the audit, internal controls, significant audit areas that we focused on during the audit, financial results, and then summarize pretty much the whole audit at the end. So first of all, the client service team has been the same team that we've had in terms of the partner and audit manager for the last 3 years. It's been Eddie Burke as the audit engagement partner and myself as the audit senior manager, with Alex Porter and Cameron Wagren also on the team in the staff role. In terms of the role of the external auditor, first is the action is that we do the planning, which I mentioned that we started our audit back in May when we started our client acceptance process of getting the engagement letter together and getting the contract with the local government commission to do the audit, and then meet with management and finance to discuss the terms of the engagement and what our plan and risk assessment is for the year. We then perform the engagement as we performed throughout the summer with testing of single audit programs, and then culminating with our field work in October. And then we express an opinion on those results, which I will summarize the results of that in the next slide. We do our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and governmental auditing standards, and express our opinion based on those standards. And then the last part of our role, while it is the last in terms of here communicating to you all the results of the audit, communications throughout the audit with management and with the board with the council through our letters engagement. We communicate that we are independent of the city of Asheville. We are, and any changes that may occur, which we will communicate to you on the next slide, of those accounting pronouncements that have been implemented this year, different from previous years. So on the next slide here, we have the key highlights, the results of our audit. We give 4 opinions on the audit. We have the financial statements we give opinion on, Yellow Book audit, which is those opinion in terms of laws and regulations and compliance with contractual agreements. And then also on federal single audit and the state single audit. And I can say proudly that with all four, we had unmodified opinions, which is the highest opinion you can get in an audit. And we had no issues in terms of being able to provide that opinion this year through our testing. In terms of internal controls, we know two areas. One with bank reconciliations, management had come to us prior to us starting the audit and noted that due to staff turnover, there was a lag in the bank reconciliations being performed, but they were kept up to date before the end of our audit, and we received all the bank reconciliations and were able to tie out the last bank reconciliation for the year and no issues with being able to perform them. And then the last one with capital assets, management had a deeper dive into capital assets in their reconciliations of subsidiary ledger and found some differences between the accumulated depreciation amounts. They found those errors, they presented them to us, we've audited that information and determined that they were correct and corrected the financial statements for that amount. In terms of single audit, I'll go into what programs we tested a little bit, but right now I can tell you that we had no single audit findings of any sort for any of the programs tested. For our SAS 114 letter, this is the letter that we are required to communicate with the board. This letter was issued with the audit, and a lot of those topics are being discussed throughout this presentation. One of those topics is that we had no adjusting journal entries as a result of this audit. We had 2 past adjusting journal entries that were not considered material enough to have to post, but that they were presented to management and determined that they were not material to post. And then we implemented GASB 73 and 74. GASB 73 was the implementation of the pension standards as it relates to those pensions that you have that are not in a trust, which is your LEOSA plan. And then the 74 is related to OPEB, which primarily relates to disclosures in the notes to the financial statements, and in the following year, GASB 75, next year you'll be putting the whole liability for OPEB on your books. In terms of our internal controls, when we plan an audit, we identify what significant transaction cycles there are, and from those transaction cycles, we get an understanding of the control environment and understand what processes are being put in place to make sure that these areas are have the proper controls. And so those areas identified during our audit were payroll, cash receipts, cash disbursements, budgeting, and the financial statement close process, which is the ultimate culmination of putting together the CAFR and the information that goes into that CAFR. In terms of adjusting journal entries, we do a test of adjusting journal entries using software Active Data. This allows us to put pools of entries that are made during the year and use certain characteristics that would allow us to identify areas that may be a fraudulent area, and we test those journal entries to see if there is any fraud related to those entries, and we noted no issues with the journal entries we tested. And then in terms of IT controls, we have an audit team specifically that looks into the IT controls at a very high level and makes sure that policies in place are in place and that things are being done, whether it be lockout settings, password length, and complexities of different employees. But we also wanted just to kind of bring to your attention, I mean, it's out there in the news now, as the cybersecurity is a big hot button issue out there, and we still need to be vigilant when we're thinking about cybersecurity. It's not something that's part of our audit to do a deep dive into those areas, but it's something that we think needs to be on the forefront of everyone's mind with all the data breaches that occur and people that are trying to hack the systems and trying to get in, and the complexity and the reputation of the city if that were ever to occur. In terms of our significant audit areas here, in terms of our assets, cash and investments continues to be a significant audit area, as well as accounts receivable, revenues, and capital assets. In terms of liabilities, your payables, accruals, expenses, payroll, self-insurance that you have, long-term debt and net position also continue to be significant audit areas. terms of other areas, we're looking at related parties, seeing that there's no related party transactions that occur that need to be disclosed within the notes of the financial statements. In terms of estimates, we've identified a number of estimates, those being allowance for doubtful accounts on your receivables, depreciation for your capital assets, the various actuarial assumptions being used in the liabilities for the LEOSA, OPEB, and Elders plan, and then claims in relation to your self-insurance. And then we're also looking into any leases that the city has, and then any legal issues. We're communicating with the lawyers of the city to identify if there's any issues that need to be accrued or talked about in the notes, and we identified none during this audit. In terms of single audit, we had federal programs and state programs we tested. In terms of our federal programs, Federal Transit Administration Cluster was the only one tested. In terms of state programs, the State Maintenance Assistance Program and PAL bill were tested. We're looking at the administrative controls in these areas, making sure that you are spending the federal and state dollars in accordance with the agreements, and that there's no issues with any compliance or controls related to it. While compliance could be being adhered to, still the control environment is very important, and we did not identify any issues with controls or compliance in relation to our single audit testing. I'm going to go, I'm going to go rather kind of quickly over these kind of highlights here, but please stop me if you want to discuss any further. What we have here is general fund revenues. Overall, general fund revenues have been up about $3.4 million. Most of that has to do with the tax revenue base and also some solid waste fees that increased during the year. In terms of general fund expenses, they went up overall $6.8 million. They went up, exceeded what the general fund revenues went up, but there still is a positive net position, fund balance change over the years. What went up here mostly is public safety, which related primarily to compensation, but also fleet charges during the year. In terms of fund balance is based on GASB 54 is determined based on non-expendables, things that are not in their power to expend, whether that be inventories or prepaid expenses or other notes receivable. Then you have restrictions that are restricted at the highest level of the government, commitments, assignments by those deemed to have the power to assign funds for certain purposes, and unassigned balance, which is left there to be able to spend and have that money to operate. And so, year over year, it went up about $6 million overall fund balance, with most of it going up in the assigned category. So there was more assignments this year with that money that was generated during the year for specific purposes. In terms of the proprietary funds, the enterprise funds that you have here, you have water resources, parking services, mass transit, and other services such as the Civic Center, which is part of the non-major fund. It went up $1.8 million, not a really drastic increase in any one. Most of the increase was water resources, though, out of all these categories. In terms of expenses, the expenses went up overall about $2 million, so comparable to your increase in revenues for each of these proprietary funds. And again, minimal increases in each kind of level. There was no significant increase in any one fund. In terms of cash and investments that the city holds, you'll see here that it was an increase about $22.2 million, and that mostly has to do with just the generation of increase in fund balance and net position for your different funds that you generate over this year. In terms of capital assets went down about $16 million, and most of that is related to the additions offset against depreciation of your assets over the last year, which exceeded the additions that happened during the year. In terms of your outstanding debt, included in outstanding debt is your pension liabilities. Overall, it went up $19.9 million, which $22.2 million of that was related to the Elders pension, which is the state-run plan, and those that has to do directly with what the state is collecting and what the actuaries are assuming will have to be paid out over the life, and what that means for the city as it relates to every governmental unit within North Carolina that is part of that plan. There's nothing really could do with that liability other than what the state kind of mandates in terms of increases or decreases in the contribution rates and such. And then, so to summarize everything, we had clean opinions, no adjusting journal entries, but 2 past adjusting journal entries, 1 financial statement finding, no single audit findings, no management letter comments, and full cooperation from management. I want to thank Barbara, Tia, Oscar of Finance. They really helped us throughout the audit to make this. It's not always easy to be audited and ask questions about all the transactions that happened throughout the year and get the details, but they really helped us to get the information we needed to perform a good audit. So I'll leave that. Any questions or comments?
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I just had one question.
Sure.
On the net pension obligations, just going back to that one, it
Sure.
jumped from 5.7 to 27.9. I realize this is what the state's telling us our liability is.
Correct.
Do you know what the actuarial changes they made that resulted in this?
So a lot of the changes that have to do with it has to be with changes in assumptions, like you have the investments that you're investing in.
Right. So do you know specifically what those?
No, I don't have specifics about exactly what makes up that, but all those kind of changes with the investments and the contribution rates that they have set have effect on it, and then also with mortality rates and the differences on that year to year.
Got it. So this was a decision made by the state, and it's the way their actuaries do it, and then it.
Yeah,
flows down to
it's
us.
basically
Okay.
strictly based on their estimates of the actuary.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara, did you have more to add to this portion?
If I could just publicly thank my staff. This was a difficult year for us. We had a lot of turnover. I had a brand-new accounting supervisor, Oscar Medina, running this part of the department, and Tia Keith, who came in from purchasing and really helped out. So I just want to thank my staff and all the hard work that they did to make this
Yes,
happen.
thank you, and thanks to them.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the only item we have under presentations for the evening. I'm going to move to the public hearings portion of the agenda. The first item, item A, has been continued. I do not need a motion. It's going to be heard on January 23rd, 2018. This doesn't say this, but it's the Ingalls on Smoky Park, so that'll come to us next meeting. The second item is a public hearing to consider, I think it's supposed to be an amendment, but the word amendment's not on my agenda, to Chapter 7, Articles 2, 5, 7, 8, and 16 and 17 of the Code of Ordinances for the purpose of defining different lodging types, additional special requirements for certain lodging types, and identifying in which districts they may be located. Although it doesn't say it here, this is a conversation primarily about short-term rentals. Shannon Tuck is going to give us an overview of this item.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I'd just like to take a couple minutes briefly to go over some of the background events that led up to this amendment. The impetus behind this amendment began with a couple of different events. First, with a regular enforcement and permitting update that was provided to the council in October of last year. In addition to the basic metrics, it had been our practice to include other notable observations or trends or other items of concern. So the October report included a statement about what had appeared to be the rapidly increasing number of conversion of dwelling units into short-term vacation rentals that had been occurring over the last year. Council requested more information about the conversions, which was presented and discussed further at the December Planning and Economic Development Committee meeting. Since the update that was provided to the PED in December, we have continued to receive applications for conversion, and an additional 53 units, if those applications are approved, will be converted. In addition to staff's observations, there were other community groups, including the Downtown Commission and the downtown area residential neighbors, who were making similar observations and expressing similar concerns about these conversions and the loss of housing in certain parts of our city, especially in the downtown. So while this discussion regarding conversions is occurring, there is a second parallel discussion that is happening, and that actually predates the update to council in October, regarding how best to manage and regulate lodging uses in general. So not just short-term vacation rentals, but just lodging uses in general. Most recently, council took action in November of this last year with the adoption of the new RAD Form Code and the update to the Haywood Road Form Code, both of which included strong restrictions on most forms of lodging. At the time of the PED meeting, staff had already begun drafting a wording amendment which aimed to individually define the different types of lodging uses, which would allow for more specific and individualized regulation. This amendment was supported by the PED, and there was additional direction and feedback that was provided that results in the amendment that's before you this evening. So to summarize, this amendment seeks to achieve three primary objectives. The first is to define the various types of lodging facilities, and this meant amending definitions where they already existed and adding new definitions where they didn't. So here's just a list. First, of the definitions that are proposed to be amended. They include bed and breakfast inn, boarding house, dwelling unit, and homestay. Then we add new definitions that previously did not exist for other lodging uses. That included extended stay hotel, large hotel, small hotel, and short-term vacation rental. Before this amendment, these different kinds of lodging activities were categorized under one general heading of lodging facilities. So it became difficult to distinguish between them without defining them further. The new definitions also included some terms that also had to be defined in order to understand the definitions, and those included definitions for family, guest room, and kitchen. The second objective was to revise the permitted use tables to include the newly defined lodging uses and to amend where those different lodging uses would be allowed. For the form-based code districts, for the RAD and for the Haywood Road, this really meant just inserting the new definitions and matching what the decisions council had previously made in November to be consistent with the new definitions. There are no additional restrictions added as a result of this amendment. However, to the larger permitted use table for the general use districts and the expansion districts, there are some changes. This is just one section of the permitted use table. This is the section under business and commercial uses having to do with lodging, under the heading of lodging. So you can see the existing lodging facilities or types of lodging uses that were already defined and included in the table, and then in red are the new. In this particular case, this table, there are two primary changes that can be summarized as first, making some of the special lodging facilities such as bed and breakfast, boarding houses, and homestays a use by right subject to special requirements in all zoning districts, not just in some zoning districts. So that, where you see the P struck out and replaced with an S, that's what that change means. That's changing it from a permitted use to a use by right.
Use by right, okay.
Use by right subject to special requirements. And that basically just applies the same set of standards across the board throughout the city for these different types of lodging uses. The second primary change was to limit the different kinds of hotels and short-term vacation rentals to the resort general use district and to the CBD commercial, lodging, and mixed-use expansion districts. The third objective to the amendment is to require an annual permit similar to what is currently required for homestays for all lawfully established short-term vacation rentals. Some of the details, how to do this, still need to be worked out, but we've been talking with our colleagues in development services, and we feel confident that we can make it a pretty easy and seamless process, hopefully just an online application where we would notify, now that we've done the research and we've identified all of the lawfully established short-term vacation rentals, we can reach out to those property owners, give them the information about how to get their permit online. Once that initial permit is established, we would notify them on an annual basis, and they'd be given a period of time to update their application, again, more than likely online. The reason that this is so important is because there are so many short-term vacation rentals and we have limited staff, and the times that these rentals are being available or made available for renting is very hard to monitor and to establish and to substantiate. So this is a mechanism that essentially balances the owner's right to continue the nonconforming use with the city's right to terminate a nonconformity should that use ever stop. That essentially concludes my introduction. The other changes that are included in the ordinance are simply to ensure alignment with these changes and to make consistency throughout the code. They are not substantive. They really are just to make sure that everything matches and lines up. Be happy to answer any questions at this time, or if you like, I'll be available during the public hearing process.
Yeah, I had a few. So Shannon, in terms of, you said a lot there. I think a lot of the folks here are wondering what impact this has on whole home short-term rentals downtown. And so in terms of trying to kind of frame this question on the short-term rental issue, is it a fair characterization to say what you're asking us to vote on, what we have here is whether individuals may operate whole unit short-term rentals in the central business district by right going forward? Is that sort of the thrust of the issue here?
Yeah, if council were to adopt this amendment as proposed, the option to convert a dwelling unit to a short-term vacation rental downtown would no longer be an option by right.
Right. And so are there any other places in the city where you could do a whole home or whole unit short-term rental by right?
Yeah, in the resort district.
Just in the resort district. But other than that, there's no other place downtown, right?
Correct. You would have to apply for one of the conditional zoning districts.
Right. And so what you said, too, in terms of some of the other changes that were being made here, essentially what this is doing is making kind of everything consistent across the city. Is that correct?
I think that's a fair characterization, yeah.
Okay. And so if somebody came to us and said, hey, look, we've got an idea for a whole home short-term rental project that we want anywhere in the city, whether it be downtown or otherwise, they could bring it to us as a conditional zone, and we could potentially approve it. Is that right?
That's correct. There is an application process available for anybody who wants to, to propose a project of that nature.
Okay. Thank you.
Any kind of lodging project, for that matter.
And just to clarify, can you tell us what the resort zoning is? That's the Crown Plaza, and is it anything else?
Crown Plaza, Grove Park Inn, and I believe there's some resort zoning up around Richmond Hill.
Okay, so those are areas that are already used for vacation?
Yes, vacation purposes. Yeah, lodging uses.
Right.
Other questions? Okay, so this is a public hearing item. So before we hear a motion from anyone on council or make a decision about whether or not to proceed, we will open this up for public hearing. We would like you to limit, well, per our rules, you limit your comments to 3 minutes. The lights on the lectern will let you know green means go, the orange means you have 30 seconds left, and red means, accompanied by a buzzing sound, means stop. So let me know if you would like to speak on this issue by raising your hand. Okay, I see one hand back there. Yes. Yep.
How's it going?
I like that you just picked that up. Yeah.
Yeah, why not? Hi, my name is Moira Gorey. I'm from Asheville, North Carolina. Oh, well, obviously, I'm from Asheville. I lived here my whole life. Last year, I moved 5 times. The first one, pretty simple. Like, my roommate got into a good relationship. They wanted to live together. I moved out. Second time, that house was sold out from under me to become a whole home rental. The third time, also sold out from under me to become a whole home rental. The fourth time, I was living at a place that I was sort of the live-in cleaner for a place. This is the only place I could find to live for a while, and it was that I couldn't be there but like 2 nights a week. I was basically living in my car. And I would go in and I'd clean the place, I'd sleep, I had my stuff there, you know. And then, but this is one of those things where I had to be, like I'd clean the place, then leave, and then come back. And then finally now I found a place that couldn't be one of those because it's got like a hole in the floor and the roof leaks and all that stuff, you know, so like I can't, that's not gonna happen. So I'm like, haha, you know, that's sort of the shape of things to come, I think, as far as like whole home rentals being like, kind of pushing me, being an artist, doing all this stuff, and Asheville as a local, kind of pushing me out of town. And I mean, I'm kind of lucky, you know. Well, all right. That's a whole thing. See you later.
Okay, I had a lady in the second row. Would you like, yeah, next, and then in the future.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. My name is Elisa Alvarado, and I'm new to all this, so bear with me. And I don't have like a lot of facts or figures or anything like that, but what I do feel is that it seems like sometimes the burden is really put on the residents to fix, which is a very complicated problem, and I understand it on all fronts. But I mean, I could suggest possibly other ways instead of simply always putting the onus on us, the residents who live here who are trying to make a living. I know personally, if I didn't have my homestay, I couldn't stay in my place. You know, I would have to leave, and I've looked at other rentals and it's too expensive. So maybe, and I know that there are a lot of people who don't live here, including hotels, who have units, and maybe we could do something where if you don't live here, then you can't do it. But if you do live here, and you're a part of this community, and you're paying taxes, and you care, then there should be some, you know, some kind of a situation where we could legally continue to live here and improve this community, instead of just always like the hotels are the ones that are getting, it seems to me that the hotels are everywhere I look, and nothing seems to be curtailing them. But we the residents keep being curtailed. You know, you can't do this. Haywood got shut down. Don't understand why that happened. There aren't even any hotels there and very few residences. You know, and it seemed to me that it was a perfect venue for vacation rentals, and now that got shut down. So my fear is that it just gets, our pie keeps getting smaller, you know, and they keep taking things away. And I just wanted to say that. I understand the issue, I understand the concerns. I don't have all the answers, but I'm definitely concerned that we're being kind of shut out, because we want to live here too. It's beautiful. Thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
Yes, back there, blue shirt. Yep.
Hi there, appreciate you letting me speak. My name's Kirk Adcock, and I have lived downtown for over 10 years now. I've been involved in the downtown community for probably 12 or 13. And as I sit there, I wonder how many people who are actually making decisions that are affecting us who live downtown actually live downtown. I can tell you it's a much different place than it was 10 years ago when I moved here. When I moved in, there was still a sense of community. There were still people that I knew on the street. There were still artists that lived downtown. But the constant advertising and the great job that the government has done, the chamber's done, Marla Tambolini, Kelly Miller before her, the CVB, they brought them here. $1 million a year they spend on advertising Asheville. What do you think was going to happen? We got 13 hotels, the last count being built. And now you're telling people who have paid high taxes, lived downtown for years, who are now sick of the tourists, who are sick of walking over the buskers and the more bums that have come. We're ready to move out. Do we have to sell our place? Can we not rent our place? Why is it only the hotel lobby gets to rent? You kind of got us in a catch-22 here. You know, you went out and advertised it. Now everybody knows about Asheville. Everybody wants to be here. The prices have gone skyrocketing. But now we're in a situation to where downtown is like a Myrtle Beach. That's what it's become. It's a Myrtle Beach in the mountains. It's another Gatlinburg because of the constant tourism. So I will tell you right there, it is a myth that any of this is about affordable housing downtown, and I'm only speaking about the CBB. I'm only talking about the very part of downtown that's the business section. I'm not talking about any outlining areas, but you show me anywhere downtown that there is anything affordable for the average person, or there is going to be anything affordable for the average person, because there's not. It's a myth. You got the BB&T building right now. There were pre-selling units in there at $650 a square foot. The last I heard, it's up to $800 a square foot. So you've got very, very wealthy people here, and then you've got some people that have been here a long time that are trying to figure out how do we still keep a presence in downtown with with the prices going up and up. My taxes have skyrocketed in the 10 years that I've been here. So there needs to be some way to figure out, if you want to look at some area outside of the CBB, the Central Business District, to start regulating, fine. But don't keep allowing another hotel like we have on Haywood Road. Try to go down Haywood Road on a Sunday when everybody's coming out of the Indigo and the Hyatt, and now we got an embassy coming across there too. You can't get down that road. So let's get over the fact that the CBB is different forever. It's not like a living place anymore. It's a place for tourists and the wealthy. That's what it's become. So the last of the people who still live there, don't punish us because it worked.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Over here, and, okay, yeah? Just kind of shake that.
Madam Mayor, City Council members, my name is Christian Hickel. I am the current president of the Asheville Bed and Breakfast Association, and in that role I represent a total of currently 14 traditional bed and breakfast inns here in Asheville. We are one of the legally, as this report says, legally established lodging formats, so all 14 of us. We understand there are a number of different formats now on the market, and they may have the right to be there, they may not have if they're illegal. I understand the city's approach to regulate that. What created a lot of confusion and surprise among those B&B inn owners is how much you're cutting back also on the definition of current lawfully established bed and breakfast inns. I see that in this proposal, in this format, they are dramatically reduced in definition. I understand from the preface that there may be some grandfathering, as I would call it, so they could continue to exist. But what this clause does, what it will most likely do, is reduce this lodging format bed and breakfast inn, which is, in a way, I would say typical for Asheville. If we were to proceed, or if you were to proceed in exactly the same format by reducing it to just 8 guest rooms, opening it up to those establishments that do not offer breakfast, which is actually part of the name B&B, the second B. 3 minutes of speaking time here is not enough to elaborate on everything. I hope this is not a done deal yet. I hope you're open for further input by your bed and breakfast running constituents. I just wanted to raise our concern and the fact that if this were to continue the way it is right now, it would shut down several businesses which currently operate perfectly legally outside of these limits that are set right now. Thank you.
Thanks. We might have the city attorney address the issue about grandfathering and whether or not the change would shut down any current operations.
The answer to that is no. As long as you're lawfully established, you can continue in the same manner that you've been operating. A change in regulations doesn't require you to conform with the new regulations, and a change of ownership doesn't either. So that nonconforming status runs with the land. So the other thing is that the 8-room requirement has always been a condition of bed and breakfasts in residential districts. So it's new to the commercial districts for consistency, but people may not have known that they may already be a nonconforming use if they established bed and breakfast in a residential district prior to that, which I think was about 10 years ago. So there's no risk that people are going to have to close their businesses down.
It is comforting to hear that also these laws are with the house, so not with the owners. So if one of
Correct.
these inns are being sold,
Correct?
they can continue
That is
operating
correct.
legally.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yes.
Thanks for letting me speak. I just wanted to give you a snapshot of one resident's experience
Can
of
you
a
just give us your
short-term.
name? Just, sorry.
Is that?
Your name.
My name is Angie Rainey.
Thanks. Sorry, go ahead.
Just wanted to give you a snapshot of one resident's experience of short-term rentals in Asheville. My family owns a duplex near Claxton School on Merriman. We bought our property because its location allows us to pursue a lifestyle where most of our trips can be accomplished on bicycle or on foot. I take my daughter to school by my bicycle. My husband commutes to work downtown on bicycle, and we bike or take a bus to church, the park, and the grocery stores. As you know, the price for property in that particular neighborhood is fairly high. The only way for us to afford our mortgage is to live in a duplex and get income from the other half of the property. Our house's proximity to Merriman Avenue and its traffic, another issue for another council meeting, makes it challenging to attract long-term tenants, but makes a very suitable short-term rental for visitors to Asheville to benefit from a walkable getaway. Please do not deny middle-class families like ours the opportunity to directly benefit from Asheville's tourism trade, enough to allow us to pursue a healthy, environmentally sustainable lifestyle. I support allowing accessory dwelling units and attached apartments to be rented short-term. I support my fellow residents to be empowered to experience just a fraction of the financial advantage that so many corporate hotels experience in the city of Asheville. I'm a strong supporter of affordable housing in Asheville. My husband and I, along with our elderly parents, manage 14 long-term rentals in Asheville, many of which we rent to at-risk tenants at a below-market rate. Having our short-term rental enables us to offset the financial burden of leaving those long-term residences' rents at a lower level. It is my opinion that it's not an either-or situation, either affordable housing or short-term rentals. I see Asheville where both can happen. I think the situation is more nuanced and complex, and the solution to affordable housing could include regulated legal short-term rentals for residents of Asheville. And for me particularly, this has been an issue of women's empowerment. I am empowered to be able to have some supplemental income so I can be caretakers for my 2 young children and help with different projects with my elderly in-laws.
Thank you.
That's all I got. Thank you.
And just to clarify, tonight's consideration doesn't have to do with short-term rentals in residentially zoned districts. This would be looking at outside of residentially zoned district, just to clarify in case anyone is confused by that. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening.
No, sorry. You're done.
I'm Sue Robbins. I'm representing downtown Asheville residential neighbors. I'm sure you know our position because we've written to you and we've spoken at every board and commission and committee meeting we could. that was addressing this issue. We support the amendment that's being brought forth tonight as it regards short-term rentals in the CBD. We strongly believe that the proliferation of short-term rentals in an area which we consider to be our neighborhood is detrimental to the sense of community that we are trying to build and maintain as residents of the CBD. And we would actually really like to thank staff for addressing this so promptly since the information about the number of conversions that are going on came out in October. I think it's important for people to remember, those people who were speaking tonight and those people who will read about this, I'm sure, and watch it on TV, that you're not outlawing short-term vacation rentals, that you're simply making it not by right. So people can still apply for permits. In fact, we hope that the amendment passes and that you consider carefully what your next steps will be when people come to you asking for those permits. Thank you.
Yes, over here.
Hello, my name is Casey Campfield. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm a local homeowner and a downtown business owner. Today's vote is very encouraging. It's encouraging that we're even talking about this at this point. The moral grounds for rolling back the rapid expansion of STRs are crystal clear. The need for homes among cash-strapped renters is greater than the needs of multiple property owners and corporations for greater profits. With a severe housing shortage and over 10 million visitors each year to a city of 90,000 residents, there is simply no good argument for expanding tourist housing at the expense of local housing. There's also a sound business argument for reducing short-term rentals in Asheville. Having a healthy balance of locals and non-locals helps diversify spending habits and buffer local businesses from the currents of seasonal visitation. The vote today is an excellent step in the right direction, but it is only one step among many needed. The ability of multiple homeowners to make use of the so-called homestay exception needs to be addressed. The homestay exception should be used to assist single homeowners using short-term rentals of rooms in their residences to supplement their mortgages, not to enrich multiple property owners. Multiple property owners already have a way to enrich themselves. It's called renting to tenants. It has worked for many centuries. It seems to be good enough. Furthermore, enforcement of current and future STR regulations needs to be strengthened. All of the resolutions in the world won't make a difference without legitimate enforcement going forward. Lastly, as a matter of good faith to the citizens of Asheville, I believe that anyone sitting on council this year and going forward should state whether they are operating a short-term rental here or elsewhere. Obviously, this will have an impact on their vote, and voters have the right to know what the biases of their elected officials are. Thank you.
Yes.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Andrew Fletcher. In 2014, I was renting a studio. Me and my band, we were renting a studio in Chicken Alley. By my count, we were some of the last non-residential creative types to be working on Chicken Alley. We were asked to leave to make room for an Airbnb. And as far as 2014 goes, that makes us sort of one of the early, I don't want to quite say victims, because I'm not here for because I have sour grapes. I'm here because of everybody else that this issue affects. It affects the people who are most vulnerable in our city, the people who make this city and bring character to it, artists, musicians, people who bust your tables, serve your drinks, cook your food. The people who are getting displaced, they're not getting displaced by 120 unit hotels. They're getting displaced by 120 individual Airbnb units strung throughout the city and concentrated in downtown, where those housing units provide the most bang for their buck as far as transit costs and green living and low carbon footprints. These are where when people can live and work in the same place, there are massive benefits for the same city and for many of the goals that council has claimed to have. When I was on the campaign trail, the number one thing that I heard was, man, I'd love to vote for you, but I live in the county now. Part of the reason for that is I was campaigning toward people that don't have mortgages, they have landlords. And many of them told me the same story that Moira said, is that they had a place where when one day they go to put their rent in the mailbox on time and they get an eviction letter out. And it needs to stop. It needs to stop if we care about the character of this community, rather than just the marginal profits of a few people who aren't worried about where their next meal comes from. So if you care about the continuing character of this community, you will pass this amendment, please. And rather than just the profits of a few, if you enact this measure, you can help to ensure that we stem the tide of lost housing, and that the money that we've put together, that we voted for in the bond for affordable housing, is not just replacing units that we've lost to Airbnb, but are actually creating new affordable housing units, some of the 5,000 that are projected to be needed in the coming years. So I request that you pass this measure, and I thank you very much for moving this thing very quickly. I've followed it from Downtown Commission, the Planning and Zoning, to here, and I'm very pleased to see the speed with which this policy has come before you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, in the back.
Council, thank you. My name is Andy Brockmeyer, here in favor of short-term rentals in the commercial business district. I believe that it is the only district where you can allow a free market economy to take place. This is a very complex issue, and I can see both sides, and I am concerned. I don't want to see, the fabric of downtown become like a ghost town of short-term rentals such as Myrtle Beach or Folly Beach. But at the same time, seeing the profits just go straight to the hoteliers who are not a local business, who do not directly bring the profits back to the local economy, that's my biggest concern. I believe this issue is pushing way too fast. There's way too many forms of short-term rentals. There's a beautiful menu for the tourist who comes here, who can do Airbnb, who can do bed and breakfast, who can do whole house rentals. But to limit them to just a sterile hotel, I think limits their Asheville experience and limits our reputation as a desirable tourist destination. So I would ask the council to slow it down and work through this thing a little slower and a little more clearly. The annual permit definitely has me concerned, and then seeing that the Downtown Commission suggests a sunset clause on short-term rentals is, if we're heading in that direction, it's going to be very alarming. How about a little more creative thinking, such as an affordable housing tax offset for those who are legal operators, or a myriad of other possibilities. The affordable housing is sort of a cliche, and I don't really see it being a reasonable thing for downtown anymore. But maybe it can be supported elsewhere. And back again to the concerns, there are also some bad operators who are filling short-term rentals full of frat party folks, and they do need to be monitored. And those of us who are good operators who own legally conforming short-term rentals, should be acknowledged for doing it the right way. So thank you for your time. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Council, this is our opportunity to make comments, to make a motion, to otherwise decide how we're going to deal with this item. Julie.
Got a couple of things to offer in response to some of the comments we've heard, and then I'm also happy to put a motion on the table, and then we can continue to have our discussion. So just a couple things we heard. We heard one question about why can't we treat people differently, people who don't live here versus people who do live here, and the honest truth is we can't do that legally. I think that would be an easy solution for a lot of us, and would help prevent the out-of-town investors buying downtown condos and renting them out, but we can't do that. We can't treat those people differently. I also, the mayor made clear that this is not about short-term, or this is not about whole house short-term rentals in residential areas. It's also not about homestays. Homestays are still legal. They're legal everywhere they are now. They will continue to be legal, and that is the mechanism that we have chosen to help people who live here continue to make their house affordable and continue to thrive while they're here. So that, nothing goes away with that. The third point is that this is not really about affordable housing. It is about housing. And we have talked in this room many, many times about the shortage of housing that we have in Asheville. We have an extreme shortage of affordable housing, but we also just have a shortage of housing. And it is a tried and true, long-standing strategy. If you have a shortage of housing, you need to build housing. and that actually also does serve ultimately to increase the affordability of older apartment complexes, older units. So by adding, you know, $400,000 condos downtown, we are contributing to ultimately, this is actually one place where I think the phrase trickle down actually works. The benefits of that do trickle down as people continue to move up and make room for other people in some of the lower rent units. So again, not about affordable housing, it's more about housing. And then I guess sort of my motivation for supporting this is, it's a lot of what several people said. Andrew, I think you said it really eloquently. This is about stemming the tide of lost housing. And it is about ensuring that people who are building new housing here, if you are building a unit that someone can live in, it has a bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen, we want that to be used for someone to live in it long term. That is the way that we help address our housing shortage. So you can't, hotels are not built to be lived in. They're different things. There are people who do live in hotels, but they're very special people. Most of us don't live in hotels. So these are different things. If you're building housing here that people can live in them long term, that's what we want to see, so that downtown doesn't become a Folly Beach or a Gatlinburg or something like that. I realize some people may think we've already tipped that balance. I don't think we have. I think we are trying to keep downtown a place that has that good mix that is for people who live here, not just people who visit here. That's incredibly important to the fabric of Asheville. So that's, and then a final point, I just want to, since I've got the mic, I'm just going to say this, because this is a common misperception, and I had it when I first got this job, and one of our public speakers said that, you know, hotel owners don't live here and that money doesn't stay in this community. And I think it's important to know, as I learned in this role, that many, I don't know if it's most, but many of our hotels are owned by people who live here. They are our neighbors. They do invest in this community. They hire local workers to work on their hotels. So just because a hotel has a brand of a Marriott doesn't mean that it's owned by Marriott. It's not owned by Marriott. It's owned by somebody, probably, often, who lives here. So these people are our neighbors. It is easy to demonize the hotels, and it's easy to demonize those big national brands, but that's not actually functionally the way it works. And I didn't know it, so I think a lot of people don't know that. So I am happy to go ahead and make the motion if we're ready for that, or if other people would like to speak first. Either way.
Comments?
Yes. I'm going to be all over the place because that's where my mind is at with this proposal tonight. I can't say that I'm an advocate or a detractor of short-term rentals or how they operate inside the city right now. I'm a little bit concerned about our process. I'm a little bit disappointed. I think before the November elections, we talked about having a comprehensive conversation about short-term rentals throughout the city of Asheville overall. I think during the election, many council members expressed that same concern, and I think after the election, council members said that they would like to have a comprehensive conversation about how we deal with short-term rentals in the city as a whole. And this process seemed to move so quickly, we've seemed to omit a lot of that. And it's just one of those things. It's one of those things that government never ceases to amaze me on how it actually works, in the sense of, for instance, I think I've been trying to get a gun buyback program for the last 2 years, and this policy moved forward in almost like 5 weeks, if that, really quickly. I think we've derailed our opportunity for a comprehensive conversation for short-term rentals by doing this. I think what about ADUs? What are we doing about all of this other stuff? I think some people came up to the microphone, and whether you're for or against it, I think people have made some really good comments. I think, you know, some things that you can talk about are, well, we've usurped the use by right. I mean, yeah, you could still come to council and petition for a short-term rental in the central business district, but honestly, I really don't think you'll get it. That's just my opinion based on how we've moved from corridor to corridor and attacked this thing piecemeal and not had the comprehensive conversation that I thought we were going to have. Property rights. Somebody came up here and they mentioned something that seemed that could fall in the line of property rights. I don't know. But these are things that I would hope that we would consider. Someone mentioned something about the most vulnerable. I know about the most vulnerable. I'm not saying the most vulnerable don't live downtown. I consider most of the folks that do live downtown that are most vulnerable are homeless or either live in subsidized housing. I'm not going for or against the policy. I'm just saying there are some things that were clearly stated that make sense to have these conversations in a comprehensive way on how we deal with short-term rentals as a whole. The speed of how fast this thing moved forward, it's you know, Councilmember Mayfield mentioned a shortage of actual housing. I don't know about everybody else, but if you got about $300,000, I don't think there's a shortage of housing in the city of Asheville. Now, I know there's a shortage of affordable housing, and this isn't about affordable housing as she stated, but I don't think there's an actual shortage of housing. I mean, you can go online and on Zillow and look up, if you got about $300,000, you can find somewhere to live in this city, in all corridors of the city. I am not saying that I'm totally against what's been put forth here, but I can't in good heart vote for this, considering that I still want to have the conversations about ADUs. Is that next? Are we going to have that conversation? Are we just going to ban all STRs in the city of Asheville? If we're going to do that and this policy moves forward this quickly, why don't we just do that? I mean, it's just one of those things that I'm very disappointed at the way that this process moved forward, and I hope that we can fix the way that these things happen with other things going forward. Again, I'm not going to support it, not because I think it's a bad policy, but I still believe that there is a comprehensive way to address short-term rentals and ADUs and all of this stuff in its totality across the board. And I don't think we did that, and I don't think we're doing good justice to policy in the city of Asheville if we do this. So if I would have came out here and not said that, you probably would have seen a 7-0 vote, and it looks like we were all lockstep and we were happy with this, but I'm not. And I think that's something that needs to be said, and I don't want to be confrontational. I just think it just needs to be said, and that's just how it is. So I won't be supporting it for the obvious reasons stated. I hope that we can continue to have a conversation, but I really feel like we've derailed that opportunity.
Yeah, I would, and I will be supportive of what's here. I do want to respond a little bit to Councilmember Young there. I am actually happy to have the conversation about ADUs and the larger conversation. I think that is something worth having. I think some of the folks who were talking about that tonight, made that point. And let me just say, I don't think the action tonight by council on the vote, whether this passes or not, will foreclose that discussion, and like I said, I'm more than happy to have that, particularly on the question of ADUs. For me, the issue really kind of boils down to the whole house and the whole unit versus the homestay. As was stated earlier, and let's be very clear, this amendment or this ordinance would make no changes to homestays, absolutely none. So whatever one could do in a residential area, one could do downtown. It makes it similar. And the same thing as with respect to whole house and whole unit short-term rentals. So for me, I think of a whole house or a whole unit short-term rental almost like a mini hotel. That's how I see it. I know not everyone does see it that way, but that's how I view it. And I think the idea of allowing folks to tap into the local economy is very important, and that's why I'm a very big proponent, I think, of homestays for some of the discussion that was had tonight. So let me say this again. I'll be supporting this tonight. I don't think this was an easy thing to do. I think the speed with which we moved on this was actually important. I think some of the data that indicated what was happening downtown with the number of units that was being converted was worth moving this process fast. It was brought before P&Z last week. That discussion was had. There have been several articles about it, and we've certainly received some emails about it. So that's sort of my 2 cents on this. I appreciate the help with staff and in turning this around very quickly. And as I said, I'll be supportive of this.
All right, I'm happy to make a motion. Okay. I move to approve the revised wording amendments to UDO Articles 2, 5, 7, 8, 16, and 17. You're
It's all
testing my
broken
knowledge
out.
of Roman numerals here, which defines and regulates various forms of lodging uses, and find that the request is reasonable, is in the public interest, and is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other adopted plans in the following ways. The amendment, number 1, modifies development standards to promote harmony and compatibility with surrounding neighborhoods, and 2, defines and provides greater clarity with respect to lodging-related land uses.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Do you feel you're good? Okay. All right, that concludes our public hearings agenda. I'm going to move to the unfinished business portion. Yes, this is a good time to transition. So we have 2 items of unfinished business. One is the Energy Innovation Task Force report, and I'm going to hand it over to Council Member Julie Mayfield.
Great. I'm going to, well, while they're exiting, this is finally what we've been waiting for quite a while, which is bringing you all kind of a comprehensive report on the work of the task force. You will remember that the task force started working early in mid-2016, and I won't go into details because we're going to get a presentation tonight that shows that, but we now have a report to share with you and our plan going forward. Just very briefly, the things that we are being asked to do tonight is, number 1, just accept the report that's being presented, and then the other 2 things are resolutions authorizing the city manager to spend money that we have already allocated for the Energy Innovation Task Force work. We are asking that part of that money be reallocated to a specific purpose that we will talk about in just a minute. But this is not, I want to make it clear that this is not a new allocation, not any new money. This is reallocation of existing dollars, and then also just approving the spending of other money that has already been allocated. So we have several people here as resources for us tonight. Jason Walls with Duke Energy is going to do the bulk of the presentation. Jason co-chairs the Energy Innovation Task Force along with me and Brownie Newman. We also have Sonia Marcus, who has been the SACE representative to the Energy Innovation Task Force. We also have Robert Sipes, who is the Vice President for Duke Energy's Western Modernization Project. Robert, raise your hand, please. And we have Sam Ruark, who is with the Greenbuilt Alliance, which will be playing a very important role in the implementation of the task force's work going forward. So with that introduction, I will turn it over to Jason to start the report. Thank you.
Mayor, members of council, good evening. But before we get started, I want to thank Maggie, because when I walked up here, there was like this audit slide with a bunch of numbers and stuff on it, and that was really throwing me off. So Maggie, thank you for simplifying things. But before we get started, it's good to be back before you. It's been a while. And, you know, one of the things I think you've heard several times this evening already is the simple fact that Asheville's growing. We do live in a community that is growing. When you drive into the city and you see the kind of the cranes that circle downtown, you know, it's an indication that we're growing. But from the numbers, since 2006, we have seen peak demand growth grow at 1.5% annually. And quite frankly, if you think about the last few weeks, the next point's pretty easy, that in the wintertime, we use about 30% more electricity than we do in the summertime, and that's been pretty evident in the last couple of weeks. But Duke Energy also projects that by 2023, we'll start to see a shortfall of capacity, meaning we won't have the capacity that's needed to meet our customers' electric needs, and a shortfall of about 17 megawatts per year beginning in 2023. And when that planning was done, what we thought was the case is that to meet that capacity shortfall, that we would need to build 190 megawatt natural gas-fired peaker plant to meet that need. Well, this community made that loud and clear that that was not a path that they were overly enthusiastic about, and they asked Duke Energy Progress to give them a chance to chart a different course for their energy future in the region. And so that really moved the community to action. And the first step was the city, Buncombe County, the city of Asheville, and Duke Energy Progress met and decided to convene the Energy Innovation Task Force. That task force was initially convened with 16 members representing different interests across our community. It was convened in May of 2016, and that seems like an eternity ago, but it's only been about 18 months with two real goals. One was to avoid or delay the construction, the additional natural gas construction that the company said it needed in that 2023 timeframe, as well as a broader, more lofty goal of transitioning the Duke Energy Progress West region to a cleaner and smarter energy future. And so to do that, we knew we needed to learn a lot, and so we enlisted the help of really an internationally renowned organization, the Rocky Mountain Institute, to really come to Asheville and help this group put a little bit of structure around the process. And because of their work, we know more about how customers in this region use energy today than we've ever known before. And their expertise really helped us validate and gain a better understanding that, that rapid growth in peak electric demand is occurring. The primary growth in the West region being Buncombe County and the city of Asheville, which is no surprise. It makes up about 85% of our customer base in the West region. That peak demand occurs in the coldest winter mornings. We may have seen a few of those recently. And that homes are transitioning. This was something I wasn't aware of, that homes are transitioning from gas and propane to electric HVAC for heating purposes. As well as it became evident that there's a lot of good work happening in this space between community organizations, governmental bodies, as well as the utility, but we're all working in our own silos. And so it became a reflection that by drawing this group together, we're able to not duplicate efforts and really support what each other are doing already. So based on the Rocky Mountain Institute's analysis, there are two primary areas of focus. One was the expansion of targeted energy efficiency, as well as shifting from customers' use of electricity. Essentially meaning shift the time when customers use it. Try not to wake up in the morning and have everybody use electricity at the same time for the same purposes on a really cold morning, which may have happened recently. And really the priorities being to increase participation in energy efficiency and to improve penetration of demand-side management, as well as expand renewables and other advanced solutions. So some recommendations that came out of their work is to establish a brand and launch a campaign to inform, educate, and engage the community. Leverage, expand, and bundle existing programs and efforts. We've learned that that is sometimes easier said than done, but it's extremely important for the success of the initiative, as well as to increase the investment and focus on low-income programs, and develop and implement new programs that don't exist today, but keep an eye on those things as they're being developed in other places and bring back those practices here, and establish goals and targets to track our progress. So when we think about success, we think about we're in a really good place. I think a lot of us have wanted to move faster and further than we have in this last 18 months, but we also recognize that we know more today than we did when we started. We have a good sense on what is going to help us move the needle, and a lot of us have been doing this as part of our already existing busy schedules. And so when we think about how we're going to enable success going forward, there are several things, but one is to launch an overarching branding campaign. What we have learned is that if we go at it just as Buncombe County, or just as the city of Asheville, or just as Duke Energy, we're not as successful as if we create something that allows people to connect with a larger movement that isn't associated with one of the three convening partners. As well as we know we need someone to help hold us accountable for timelines, for initiatives, for campaigns, so that we can move further faster. And so we know that success is going to be dependent on hiring a project manager, which is why Sam at the Green Built Alliance becomes so critical. and his willingness to help with that. And to create a central hub. Right now, to find all these things, you go to multiple sites and click on multiple ways, and sometimes you end up going really far before you find something that should have been really close. And so we know creating a central hub is important to help people connect with what's going on. As well as we need to train and cultivate local contractors. We know that if we grow interest in these programs and these different initiatives, that we need to have local contractors ready to do the work so that customers don't get frustrated. As well as we need to leverage, expand, and bundle existing programs. That is critical and important. That is of critical importance to the overall success of what we're trying to do. And it's not easy to do that, we're learning, but we're on a path to do so. As well as we know that we need to advance low-income energy efficiency efforts and really target those folks who need it the most in some of our communities. And so those are some of the things that we know we need to enable success of this initiative. And before I invite Sonia up to kind of outline or to take any questions on the resolution that's before council for the reallocation of funding, I think it's important to reflect on something that we've all become very good at understanding, is that our greatest opportunity through the Energy Innovation Task Force is the fact that we're all sitting around a common table now. Instead of going off and doing our own things that we believe are the right things for our individual organizations, we're all sitting around a table, we're checking each other from time to time, and we want to ensure that we can move further, faster, but together.
Great. So Sonia, why don't you come up and just share sort of SACY's take on this. Thank you very much, Jason. We all received a letter emailed from the SACY chair, but Sonia, you've been SACY's liaison in all this.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Sonia Marcus, and I serve on the Sustainability Commission. And I've been involved since the earliest stages of this initiative, and as some of you know, SACY has been very centrally involved in all of this work from the beginning. In fact, when I think back, it was 4 years ago when I first became involved in these activities, and I'll give a little shout out to Gwen, who was our council liaison at that time, and we were working on the Clean Energy Framework, which is part of the context for this work. We were really in a completely different situation at that time. There was no discussion whatsoever about retiring the coal-fired power plant. We really didn't have Duke Energy on board in any meaningful way in these conversations, and no resources had really been allocated, to step up our own efforts in the city operations to tackle major issues such as building energy audits, which is something that we're now doing. So I'll just say overall that SACY and myself included, we're very proud of the work that's taking place right now, and we feel like it's moving in a very good direction, and that we would like to see council and the mayor continue to support the activities of this group. I think that there is a concern on SACY that we continue to provide critical funding for the activities that were outlined as priority activities in our clean energy framework. So as you may be aware, the reallocation of these funds toward the newly created positions to coordinate the campaign are actually being essentially detracted from other initiatives that we had planned to fund in this cycle, including some important energy education initiatives through the Development Office. So we just want to bring that to your attention and say that we hope that you'll be open and aware and willing to discuss further funding allocations for priority energy projects that really target city operations. But on the whole, we feel this is an appropriate reallocation at this time, and happy to answer any questions you have from a citizen perspective about the work of this particular group.
Great. I'll just thank you, Sonia, and let me just add a couple things. This partnership that we have with Duke and the county continues to be unique in the country. We are cutting new ground, and I know that the Duke is looking at this, continues to look at this as a potential model to use in other communities in which they work. And Sonia brings up a really great point, which is this is not a one and done. We all envision, and as Jason pointed out, for us to continue to achieve the goals of the Energy Innovation Task Force, as well as the city's sustainability goals around energy. This will require us to participate in, a long-term, multi-year partnership with these partners. That's the way we're going to be successful, and that will require us to consider allocations every year as part of our regular budget cycle. So does anybody have questions for Sonia or Jason, who's still here?
I'm supportive of this. The thing that I spoke with Julie about, and just want everybody to know that a year from now, when we're looking at this work, I want there to be real measurables, like what makes this position a success, numbers, et cetera, so that it isn't just, because it's the description right now looks to me a little squishy. And so Julie has assured me that that is built into the plan, but, council needs to see what the goals are and how they got met and how we're going to continue to ratchet up those benchmarks. So that's my only concern about this, is I just don't want to, I just want to make sure we have real measurables behind this.
Yeah, and let me ask Jason to address that. There has just been a very recent conversation around goals, so you can share where that's headed.
So stay tuned, Vice Mayor. So actually we have an Energy Innovation Task Force meeting this Friday, where we're going to be talking with that group about some of those goals that we've talked about, and about how we're going to measure the success of that position in the first year of this effort. So a lot of that work has happened recently, and so this was really focusing on what we accomplished or what we started to go through last year. But we're excited to present some of those measures and benchmarks that we'll be measuring against at the meeting on Friday.
If I may just add, the agreement that we will enter into with your authorization will be a performance contract. So those measures will be tracked, and quarterly payments to the Greenbelt would be made based upon accomplishment of those goals as well.
Great.
I have a question for you, Sonia, and just requiring some straightforward transparency.
Yeah.
Are you supporting this reallocation of funds because you think that in years to come, the priorities around your clean energy framework will be supported?
Yes.
And that is your hope?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, great. Thank you both very much. I appreciate it. And Sam and Robert, thank you also for being here. So I am happy to make a motion. Before I do that, I just want to thank council, current and former councils, for supporting this effort generally and getting us on this track. I also want to thank our city manager, who's been very helpful in helping me navigate this. This is a strange animal, this Energy Innovation Task Force, and I have not always known how to navigate it through our processes, and so I just want to thank you for helping make that happen. So, do we need 3 separate motions?
Well, you've got two resolutions.
Like 2 resolutions.
And I think the Compass is one, yes. So I would make a motion for number 2 and then number 3.
Okay, great. So I move that we approve the resolution approving the addition of the Energy Innovation Task Force recommendations to the City of Asheville Sustainability Management Plan, and authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with the Greenbelt Alliance.
Second.
All right, a motion and a second. We don't have to take public comment on this item. So.
It's up to you. It's up to you.
Right. Is there anyone wishing to speak on this item? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and then the second one.
Second one, I also move that we adopt the resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a memorandum of understanding with Buncombe County to enlist the Rocky Mountain Institute to continue its efforts in accomplishing the Energy Innovation Task Force Phase 3 scope of work.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
No to the second one?
No.
Yes.
And just to be clear, that money is already spent. I mean, it's not already spent. The work is already done. Sorry. In the resolution, in that second resolution, the Rocky Mountain Institute's work is done, it's wrapped up, and there is no other allocation to bring, or plans to bring them back, so.
Okay, all right, that concludes the Energy Innovation Task Force item, unless there's anything else. Thank you all for coming down here for this one. All right, looks like the next team is moving in place for the item B under unfinished business, redevelopment of city-owned land for affordable housing. Heather, you're our MC for this item. I'll kick it to you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight with this item. I'm going to be joined by Nikki Reed, our Real Estate Program Director, and Stephanie Monsendahl, our Strategic Development Office Director. You're seeing us in a team approach tonight because we believe that this initiative will be able to accomplish multiple city goals, and so we are taking a team approach to put our best work into achieving these goals. We are starting with our comprehensive affordable housing strategy, adopted a few years ago by council along with some related priorities to begin addressing the city's substantial need for additional affordable units. Utilizing locationally efficient city-owned land for affordable housing development is a key overall strategy in our affordable housing strategy, and one of the ways we believe we can accomplish a substantial number of units to address the supply deficit. Particularly on these sites, we are prioritizing the highest return on investment measured by the number of affordable units possible, the percentage of permanently affordable units possible, contributions to long-term economic and tax-based growth, and the sustainability of these projects. One of the tools that we have developed and that some of you have seen to help us accomplish these goals is a map of city-owned property and a classification of our properties. My teammate Nikki Reed is going to give you a really brief overview of that map as we move forward.
Okay, so hi Council, my name is Nikki Reed. I'm the city's Real Estate Program Director. So in November, we gave a demonstration of and a guided tour of the city-owned property database. And as a quick reminder, the key to developing this mapping layer was the classification or grouping of the city-owned properties as a way of better understanding the property that the city owns and how we use these assets. So the classifications, as you can see on the screen here, the first, which we'll be speaking of tonight, are the strategic investment sites. We also have properties in the review category, as well as operational, which is our facilities and city operations buildings, monitor, which is those properties which we have under lease primarily, and the stewardship classification, which is mainly our parks assets. So again, I'll just kind of do a quick demo and reminder of how this map works. We are looking here at this layer of the strategic investment sites, since these are the key properties in which we intend to repurpose for affordable housing. So this map is publicly available and can also function as a communication tool. You'll see when I click on this site, you can link to the city's website on affordable housing with updates on this process moving forward, as well as a public file where we have information. And so you can look at this as kind of a real estate portfolio of properties that we intend to develop, and with that we can also look at the performance of that portfolio. So here with the Hilliard Avenue site, as you know, 360 Hilliard, we have the 64 units of mixed income housing, which is currently moving through the design and permitting process, and we anticipate that the development team is hoping to break ground late spring, early summer. Off the map, but to the west, is the Cedar Hill properties. That's 60 acres of vacant land, and in December, council authorized staff to produce an RFQ to solicit a developer to partner on the development of that site. And so now I'd like to turn it over to Stephanie Monson, and she's going to talk about 3 other properties within our portfolio and the next steps on process concerning those sites. Okay, Steph.
Hey, Mayor and Council, thank you very much for this consideration tonight. Again, I'm Steph Monsendahl, and I'll be the project manager for the item that's under consideration. Staff is asking you to consider authorizing the city manager to contract with Lord X Sargent in the amount of $240,660. The funds will be used to thoroughly research, study, and assess, in other words, do the due diligence on 3 pieces of city-owned property. But ultimately, the intent of this money is to prepare council to give staff direction about how to use $15 million of the $25 million of affordable housing bonds that the citizens dedicated last year. The 3 sites are called high-impact sites. They are part of that strategic investment portfolio, but they are characterized a little bit differently than most of the sites you have seen. One thing is they're in growing commercial corridors already that have a lot of mixed use. Another thing about these sites is that they're located adjacent to some significant public investments. Also, because of the historic nature of these sites or the current use of these sites will require us as city planners to give extra consideration to not only the neighbors in the immediate area, but maybe some hidden stakeholders who are concerned about the development of the sites. Additionally, they're a little bit larger than some of the other strategic investment sites. You can see here that you've got a 5-acre site on the top left that's 319 Biltmore Avenue, otherwise known as Matthews Ford, is adjacent to Lee Walker Heights neighborhood, just west of the Oakhurst neighborhood, and pretty much connects the medical district and the south side. 91 Riverside Drive is also known as the old ice plant site. It's about 2 acres, and it sits right adjacent to the city's investment in the rad tip. You have a 7-acre parcel on South Charlotte Street. 172 to 179 is between Beaumont and Biltmore, and this really is the connective tissue between downtown and the East End Valley Street neighborhood. And this parcel was acquired through urban renewal. For this program of work, the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee will be used as council's advisory board, and also for staff, this will be the sounding board that we use to better understand if there are red flags moving forward, and we'll let you know about that. But transparent and relationship-based communications are going to need to be threaded throughout this entire process, and city staff is going to help the consultants substantially with this. The project is basically cut into 3 phases of work. The first phase is the background or baseline assessment. As you can imagine, this will be pretty detailed. We do know some things about these sites, but we do not have an accurate depiction of all of the site constraints, nor have we had extensive discussions with neighborhoods to talk about what might be appropriate as far as massing densities for these specific sites. Even in this early stage, we'll have a pretty good idea of what the potential mix of for sale and for rent units would be regarding the affordable housing component. At the end of this, we'll get a summary of findings. There'll be a full report, and council will be able to assess at that point whether or not they want to move forward with all 3 sites or stop work on any of the sites. The second phase is the site development scenarios. We basically take all the work that is completed in the first phase and start blocking those out as illustrations, and we will refine and test those with stakeholders as we move along. This is where we actually are working pretty hard on detailed pro formas as well in the middle phase. And the capstone of this phase is an open house that will be held at each one of these sites. So not only will the immediate neighborhoods be engaged in that, but this is also a time for the general public that may not have participated as much to come on the site and learn about what the future might hold regarding development there. The third phase and final phase is the implementation plan and report. This is where recommendations to council are really prepared. And this is going to include such things as how you might choose to phase the development of any of these parcels. It'll definitely have an overview of the complete cost for development of the parcels, but more importantly for you, it will have cost estimates associated with any site development prep that you might want to do as an inducement to getting a public-private partnership going. Also, recommendations on regulatory changes that might need to be made, or any kind of incentives that would help achieve your goals at that point. And an interesting piece of engagement in this part is that we will be working directly with local, regional, and national developers and interviewing them with these refined pro formas and scenarios to really take their temperature on what might happen in our community. And at the end of all of this, this is where a council has the ability to direct staff for the use of that $15 million. So we are right here in this outline of yellow, and we're moving towards that yellow block. The timeline for this process is about 6 to 8 months of process work, and I would say about 1 to 2 months of board and council review. So what we're looking at here is that hopefully by the end of October, council is sitting in this chamber looking at the report and providing staff with direction on next steps. So a little bit about Lord X Sargent, I'll call him LAS. Lord X Sargent was selected through a qualifications-based process with the city. They scored not only very high on the skills required to perform this work, but also they have a strong, proven team that has done this exact same work in other communities that share characteristics with Asheville. And we feel very strongly that they can complete this work on time and within budget. Another thing is that city staff has reviewed these fees, and we find that they are quite reasonable. They are on par with what other firms are charging for similar services and other projects that we have worked with in our community in the past couple of years. Regarding this contract, staff believes that this is, if you authorize this contract, that it will promote council strategic goals and also align very well with community plans, and for that reason staff does recommend that you authorize this contract tonight. A few words on next steps. So if you do authorize this contract tonight, we're going to get to work immediately, and some of the first phase things that we'll be doing is a communications and engagement plan, really scoping that out and making sure that we're solid at the very start. Another thing is that my teammate, Nikki Reed, the real estate director, is going to be hiring a firm that can provide the geotechnical services for not only this, but for some of the other strategic investment sites and other work that the city needs. And she has an RFQ out on the street right now. It's on the city's bid page, and council will be looking at that contract that can support this work at the end of February. Lastly, especially for the general public, if this contract is authorized, the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee meets monthly in a public setting, first Thursday of the month, 9:30 a.m. here at City Hall, and that is one way that you can stay connected. As I mentioned, we're here as a resource and can answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Don't leave.
I have a question. So I know that we need to spend the bond money within 7 years of November of 16. So what would that look like to staff at the end of 5 to 7 years with this with this portion of the bond money? I mean, does that mean...
I think that that's the point of this report, is to find out with $15 million, what is the most important thing that you can accomplish at the end of this time period. So I think that if staff were to say, that would just be conjecture, but we're hoping to really have the data that helps you make that decision. I didn't answer your question.
So I think I may be able to give you some, for examples. So each of these 3 sites that we talked about are different in nature. So potentially what it could look like is that on the Matthews Ford property, we would buy the property. So we would spend $5.3 million because we currently have it under contract. So of the $15 million, we would buy the property, and that would be what we would use the bond money for, as well as potentially make improvements to that site, like demolition or something, to be able to spend that money. Is that specifically what you're asking? Like, what would we envision spending the $15 million on?
Right, and given this timeline and the fact that, so now we wouldn't even be looking at this until 2 years into the bond cycle. Are we running up against the possibility that we're not going to spend the money consistently with the law?
Well, that is not an option, so we are going to do everything that we can do to make that not be the case. So on each of the 3 sites, what the results of the study will show is which of these sites is most likely to be developed sooner and how that money would be spent to further those sites for affordable housing. So if it were the Charlotte Street property, it may be relocating fleet or clearing out the ABC building. So that report within this time period would specifically spell out, here's how we get to spend the $15 million to get the units within the time period allotted by the bond.
Okay.
Does that answer it?
Okay.
Well, and I just want to clarify, if it looks like we're running up against the deadline on this, we have the ability to reallocate that money to other affordable housing projects that might be further along that need capital infusion. So we have multiple ways to spend it. This is how we've said we want to spend this chunk of money, but we can move it around because that's just our own imposition on ourselves.
Okay.
Other questions?
Prepared for make a motion.
Okay, please do.
Mayor, I recommend that City Council adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a professional services contract with Lord X Sergeant not to exceed $240,660 for the design, land planning, engineering, financial feasibility, and consulting services necessary to perform the due diligence for affordable housing on real properties identified by the City of Asheville.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there anyone wishing to comment on this item? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have concluded our unfinished business. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to turn it over to the Vice Mayor for boards and commissions.
Okay. We authorized the formation of an audit committee at our last meeting, I believe, and the applications, so anybody who wants to apply for that, it's time to apply. When we form that audit committee or authorize the formation, a city council member should be a part of that 5-member board, and the boards and commissions committee recommends that Gwen Whistler be the council representative on the audit committee. So I make that motion.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Any opposed? Okay, great. For the Board of Adjustment, we have the Boards and Commissions recommends the reappointment of Philip Hardin as a regular, John Cletus as an alternate, and to appoint Paul Wilczewski, maybe, as a regular, and Carter Webb as the alternate, and then to advertise for the new alternate position that is created as a result of moving Paul from from an alternate to a regular appointee. So that's a motion. Do I have a second? Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Well,
am I supposed
we don't take comments during nominations and elections for boards and commission, but you are welcome to comment at the end of the meeting during the public comment period.
Well, this is a point of order, Madam Mayor. Philip Hardin is not qualified.
Okay, thank you.
So for the Downtown Commission, for three slots, we got 19 applications, which is amazing and great, and there were a lot of wonderful candidates. Unfortunately, boards and commissions had to pick 3. So we would recommend Stephen Lee Johnson, Kimberly Hunter, and Andrew Fletcher. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. For the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee, again, we had 7 applications, which again is fabulous. We must be getting the word out. So, and the boards and commissions would recommend that we appoint Marcia Baycoat and reappoint Charles Rosenblum, and ask that the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee relook at the other applications and give us a third recommendation. The recommendation they gave us wasn't a person who was actually eligible to be on the committee. So that's a motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. Again, Sustainability Advisory Committee, SACE, we had 18 applications for 3 slots. Amazing. The Boards and Commissions Committee recommends that we appoint Renee Mazurek and reappoint John Knorr and Jeffrey Habron. May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Lovely. Tree Commission, the Boards and Commissions recommends the appointment of Cecil Bothwell and Sharon Sumrell, and reappoint Diane Hillgrove, and ask that Amy Smith be appointed for the unexpired term, which ends on 12/31/18. Could I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay, that concludes boards and commissions. Now is the public comment period, and I have one person signed up so far, which is Will Thibodeau. Am I saying that right? Yes. So this is an opportunity to speak for 3 minutes on items that were not on the agenda.
Good evening, City Council, City Manager, and the public. Tonight, I come to you as a taxpayer with a message about a lack of impartiality in our city government. In 2013, I was an employee.
Mr. Thibodeau, please direct your comments to City Council.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
In 2013, I was an employee, and my boss, the then Director of Development Services, Shannon Tuck, gave me a choice to either resign or be fired. I resigned. In 2017, I received a notice of violation about some work that I had done. I received a permit, the final inspections and approvals, and then I received the violation. The Development Services Director, Ben Woody, said I would have to get approval from the zoning administrator, Shannon Tuck, and she subsequently said I must perform, which I eagerly did. At this point, we have a city employee, the highest decision maker over zoning rules and regulations, who is our principal planner, passing judgment on a taxpayer that she previously had fired from city employment. Can you see the impartiality, the lack of impartiality that exists in the situation? As taxpayers, we must require local government to be fair and impartial in all of their decisions. We want to be treated fairly, and we want others to be treated fairly. When you have a lack of impartiality that exists in our local government, how can community members have faith in or support your organization or your initiatives? How can banks loan money for investments? How can developers be assured that they are getting fair decisions? You say you want to provide equity. How can you provide equity when you have a lack of impartiality? I believe Shannon should have recused herself from any conversation or inclusion in the decision-making process for my notice of violation. These actions reflect poor judgment and should not be tolerated in our city government. I really do not want to be here tonight, but I think that this had to be spoken. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't have anyone else signed up to speak, but if there's anyone else wishing to speak, yes, please.
Yes, Ken Sherlin, and I had intended to only address the fact that Philip Hardin wasn't eligible for reappointment to the board. Under the UDO 766, he can only serve 2 terms. City Council, he's already served from January 21st, 2009 to January 21st, 2010 as an alternate. Then he served from January 21st, 2010 to January 21st, 2013, January 21st, 2013 to January 21st, 2016, and January 21st, 2015 to January 21st, 2018. So if you would, he's already served 4 different terms, making him ineligible under the UDO. So as a point of order, you cannot reappoint him to the Board of Adjustment.
Okay.
Or you'll be in violation of your own rules.
So we'll thank you for bringing that to our attention. I'll ask Maggie and the city attorney to take a look at that.
And those were provided by the city.
Thank you.
So you have 2 positions available. I have applied, and I would ask for consideration to be on the Board of Adjustment. I'm fully qualified under the state, where the state has a rule that says you should fully consider veterans as a priority. I fall under the qualifications for the veterans, and you have no member from the East Asheville community, which I happen to represent, and you look for diversity on that board, so I make myself fully available to serve. Your current board has only 1 member who has met the participation requirements of 75% attendance. The rest have failed to meet the attendance requirement, and I pledge to this council that I will fully attend and meet more than the attendance requirements that all your current members have met. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, we have a closed session motion.
I move that the Asheville City Council go into closed session for the following reasons: to prevent disclosure of information that is privileged and confidential pursuant to the law of North Carolina or not considered a public record within meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes. The law that makes the information privileged and confidential is North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318, 10A3. The statutory authorization is contained North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318, 11A1, to consult with an attorney employed by the city about matters with respect of which the attorney-client privilege between the city and his attorney must be preserved, including but not limited to a lawsuit involving the following parties: PHG Asheville LLC versus the City of Asheville. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143 through 118, 11A3, to establish or to instruct the city staff or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the city in negotiating the terms of a contract for the acquisition of real property by purchase, option, exchange, or lease. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318, 11A5. To consider qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, or conditions of appointment of an individual public officer or employee. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318, 11A6. And to prevent the disclosure of information that is confidential pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 160A through 168, the Personnel Privacy Act. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318, 11A1.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We will adjourn.